Hello, my name is Daniël Muskitta and welcome to this video about the Dragonetti bow. Ever since I started playing the double bass, I was fascinated by the huge effect a bow can have on the bass's sound. Nowadays, most of the modern double bass players use either a Toured model with a French hold or a Fretschner model with a German hold. However, similar to the great variations of double bass models, there used to be dozens of different bow models as well, all of which had their own characteristics. What I find most interesting is how the bows were made or adapted to fulfill the demands of certain music, or that the type of bow brought inspiration to the composer. In this video, I'm going to look at the Dragonetti bow to find out where it originated and how it developed. The early double basses were members of the family of viols. This family is presumably older than the violin family and can be dated back all the way to the 15th century. In the middle of the 16th century, the famous Italian luthier Gasparo Bellotti, or Gasparo da Salo, started building one of the first double bass-sized instruments. These big instruments, with long, thick and heavy strings, obviously needed a bigger and heavier bow than what had been used until then. Unfortunately, almost no double bass bow from before 1700 survived. Contrary to the musical instruments, bows were often made of local and cheap wood. When a bow was damaged or broken, it was much cheaper to buy a new bow, rather than asking a bowmaker for a difficult and expensive repair. This is why most bows became unplayable and often disintegrated over time. Fortunately, in iconography we can still find some very interesting bows depicted on paintings, frescoes, mural paintings, etc. This illustration made by Giacomo Franco from around 1600 depicts the underhand bow hold that is so inherent to viol playing. Before the middle of the 18th century, there were two ways to construct the frog to the stick. The first is called a clip-in frog. This means that the hair is tightened by bending the stick a bit and meanwhile sliding the frog into a notch to secure it. Another way is to attach an iron wire to the frog that can be hooked up into a sawtooth-like piece of metal, which is secured into the stick. This is called a crémaillère. From around mid until end of the 18th century, a bow with a screw mechanism became more common. The tension of the hair can be tightened or loosened by turning a screw in and out of the frog. In the 18th century, we also find bows with a distinctive outward curve. This so-called convex curvature is the result of the tension of the hair.
Ik heb hier een stok, dat is van taxushout. Die heb ik gewoon recht gemaakt. Maar doordat je hem opdraait, gaat hij vanzelf krom staan. En dat heeft een hele natuurlijke speelmethode, zeg maar. Terwijl alles wat je zo maakt, ik heb allemaal mallen liggen hierboven. Dat is een enorme klus om dat zo te krijgen. Want je moet per 5 centimeter moet je het heet maken en dan buigen. En dan moet je het wordt zo heet dat je het bijna niet vast kan pakken.
In some Italian museums, we can still find a few 18th century double bass bows that even have an extreme sawn-out curvature towards the tip. A reason for that may be that, in contrary to a thin violin bow, a double bass bow needed to be thick. As a result, a thicker stick didn't have enough spring to create enough space between the hair and the stick, without the danger of snapping the stick. The Italian Domenico Dragonetti, born in 1763, was an exceptional talent on the double bass. At the age of 24, he was accepted in the orchestra of the Basilico di San Marco in Venice. And after 3 years, he became the principal double bass player because he dwarfed the other players by his talent. In the footsteps of many other successful musicians in Italy, he moved to London after he got an offer to play in the King's Theatre. Apart from his then 200 years old precious Gasparo da Salo double bass, he most likely also took a bow with him that looked something like this. This bow pattern, with its underhand grip, is easily recognizable by its distinctive outward curve and by its relatively short length. In the beginning of the 19th century, some of the finest bowmakers had their workshop in and around London. Probably Dragonetti went to bowmakers such as John Dodd. to ask them to make an even better version of his own Italian bow, by making it longer, heavier and with a denser kind of wood.
Dus je moet wel een soort kwaliteit zien te vinden die stabiel blijft. Of je het nou buigt of rechter maakt, dat maakt volgens mij niet zoveel uit. En wel het voordeel van pen en boek en letterhout is dat het behoudt zijn kwaliteit. En dat is ook een beetje de sport om houtsoorten te vinden die diezelfde kwaliteit hebben, maar gewoon veel minder kosten en gewoon makkelijker te kopen is. Maar dat tropische hardhout, dat is heel erg knetterhard. Dus de stof die je eraf haalt met schrapertjes of met de schaaf, dat stof wat achterblijft, dat is heel ongezond. Dus dan draag ik een maskertje. Ik heb een stofzuiger die meteen aanstaat, meteen afzuigt naar buiten. Anders hou je dat niet vol. En vroeger hadden ze dat natuurlijk niet. Hè?
It is remarkable that since the invention of the screw mechanism, which was commonly used in the 19th century, the Dragonetti bows kept their clip-in frogs, sometimes secured with a brass screw or with 2 silver rings. The Dragonetti bow became immensely popular, not only by double bass players in England, but also inspired makers in France after Dragonetti sent one of his bows to the Paris Conservatoire after Rossini had asked him to teach on his popular bow. This is a bow with a French overhand grip that has a stick and head that is familiar to the English Dragonetti bows. The adaptation to the overhand grip has its difficulties due to the significant weight of the tip that causes the bow to be not well balanced. In the second half of the 19th century, after Dragonetti also sent his bow pattern to the Dresden court, German bowmakers, particularly living in the town of Markneukirchen, started making bows that looked quite similar to the English Dragonetti bows. After Dragonetti's death in 1846, the Dragonetti bow slowly started to lose ground in Europe. One reason was the rise of 2 other types of bows, the toured bow and the Fechner bow. For example, the great double bass virtuoso Bottesini called the Dragonetti bow inelegant and said that it duffles the sound. In a way, Bottesini had a point because stylistics like sustaining a note and playing legato became more important, meaning that the bow needed to adapt to be able to keep up with the musical demands of the time. Another important factor was the pursuance of uniformity in the orchestras, who started demanding their musicians to use the same kind of bows. Today, we rarely see Dragonetti bows used in modern orchestras. However, in historically informed orchestras, Dragonetti bows are often used by bass players, although one may reconsider the use of a Dragonetti bow for music from before the 19th century. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching and don't forget to like this video.
Ik weet nog goed, ik begon met stokken bouwen en ik speelde Matthäus in het Concertgebouw. Die stok heb ik hier nog. En mensen keken om in het orkest. Wat is er met jou gebeurd? Wat klinkt dat anders? Toen had ik gewoon zo'n enorme dikke pook van bolle trie had ik gemaakt. Nou, en dat klonk in dat Concertgebouw natuurlijk op zo'n mooie bas. Dat klinkt altijd. Dus het is ook een beetje wat er ontstaat op dat moment.